Sometimes the most expensive mistake you can make costs you nothing at all. Marcus Blackwell thought he had everything figured out when he hired someone to pretend to be his fiancée. What he didn't count on was meeting the wrong twin sister. Marcus Blackwell stared at the contract spread across his mahogany desk, his jaw clenched tight enough to crack teeth. The legal document represented everything he despised about his family's world: manipulation, appearances, and the suffocating weight of expectations that had followed him since birth. Okay, before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. At 32, Marcus had built Blackwell Dynamics into a tech empire worth over $2 billion, revolutionizing data security for Fortune 500 companies. But none of that mattered to his grandfather, Theodore Blackwell, the iron-fisted patriarch who still controlled the family trust fund that would make Marcus one of the wealthiest men in America. The ultimatum had been delivered 3 weeks ago during what Theodore called a family meeting in the sterile boardroom of the Blackwell estate in Martha's Vineyard. Marcus could still hear his grandfather's gravelly voice echoing off the expensive wood paneling. "You're 32 years old, Marcus. It's time you settled down and started thinking about the family legacy. Find yourself a suitable wife by Christmas, or the trust fund goes to your cousin Bradley." Bradley Blackwell was everything Marcus wasn't. Charming in that artificial way that came naturally to politicians, married to a senator's daughter, and completely incompetent when it came to actual business. The thought of Bradley inheriting $200 million made Marcus's stomach turn. Marcus had tried reasoning with his grandfather, explaining that his company was thriving, that he was focused on expanding into international markets, that marriage wasn't a business transaction. Theodore had simply adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses and smiled that cold smile that had terrorized 3 generations of Blackwells. "Love is a luxury for people who don't have responsibilities, Marcus. You have 6 months." Now, with Christmas rapidly approaching and no romantic prospects in sight, Marcus found himself considering options he never thought possible. His personal assistant, Jennifer Chen, had discreetly placed a business card on his desk that morning with nothing but a phone number and the words, "Specialized arrangements, confidential solutions." The woman who answered the phone had a professional voice that somehow managed to convey both warmth and absolute discretion. "Elite Companion Services. This is Victoria speaking. How may I assist you?" Marcus had explained his situation in vague terms. A family obligation, the need for someone to pose as his fiancée for several family events leading up to Christmas. Complete confidentiality required. Victoria had listened without judgment, asked practical questions about timeline and expectations, and quoted a fee that would have bought most people a luxury car. "We have several accomplished actresses on our roster who specialize in long-term arrangements," Victoria had explained. "Based on your requirements, I believe Sofia Martinez would be perfect for your needs. She has a master's degree in theater from Juilliard, speaks 4 languages, and has experience with high-profile clients who require the utmost discretion." The background check Marcus had his security team run on Sofia Martinez revealed an impressive resume. 28 years old, born and raised in San Diego to a family of doctors and lawyers. She'd moved to New York after college to pursue acting, but had transitioned into what she diplomatically called private performance work, when Broadway proved less financially stable than her student loans required. No criminal record, no scandals, no red flags. Just a woman who had figured out how to monetize her considerable talents in an unconventional way. They met for the first time at Café Lucinda, an upscale restaurant in Manhattan's Upper East Side, where Marcus felt confident they wouldn't encounter anyone from his social circle. He arrived 15 minutes early, a habit ingrained by years of business meetings, and positioned himself at a corner table with clear sightlines to the entrance. When Sofia walked through the door, Marcus felt his carefully constructed plan wobble slightly. She was stunning in a way that seemed almost effortless. Long, dark hair that caught the afternoon light, intelligent brown eyes that seemed to take in everything at once, and a confidence that announced itself without saying a word. She spotted him immediately and approached with the kind of smile that could have sold $1 million deal or launched 1,000 ships. "Marcus, I'm Sofia. It's wonderful to meet you." Her handshake was firm, professional, and lasted exactly the appropriate amount of time. As she settled into the chair across from him, Marcus noticed she moved with the practiced grace of someone accustomed to being watched, evaluated, judged. "I've reviewed the parameters Victoria outlined," Sophia said, declining his offer of wine and ordering sparkling water instead. 6 months, culminating in a Christmas Eve announcement at your family's annual charity gala. Several smaller family events in between to establish our relationship. Complete discretion, no physical intimacy beyond what's necessary for appearances. Marcus nodded, impressed by her directness. "My grandfather can be difficult. He'll ask personal questions, try to test you. My family has a way of digging into people's backgrounds." Sophia's smile never wavered. "I've been doing this for 3 years, Marcus. I once spent 4 months as the girlfriend of an oil executive whose mother hired a private investigator to follow me. We created an entire fictional childhood complete with photo albums and school friends who would corroborate my story if called upon. That's thorough. It has to be. My reputation depends on complete authenticity. By the time we're done, your grandfather will believe we met at a charity auction for pediatric cancer research, bonded over our shared love of vintage wines and sailing, and fell in love over a weekend in the Hamptons that never actually happened." Marcus found himself genuinely impressed, and after Christmas? "We'll have a very civilized breakup in January. Mutual decision, we remain friends, no drama. I'll sign a non-disclosure agreement that ensures I'll never discuss our arrangement with anyone. You'll get your inheritance, I'll get my fee, and we'll both move on with our lives." It sounded perfect. Too perfect, perhaps. But Marcus had learned to trust his instincts in business. And every instinct told him Sophia Martinez was exactly what he needed. They spent the next 2 hours crafting their fictional relationship, complete with inside jokes, shared memories, and the kind of intimate details that would satisfy even Theodore Blackwell's suspicious nature. Sophia took notes in a leather portfolio, occasionally asking clarifying questions that demonstrated she understood the complexity of what they were undertaking. "One more thing," Marcus said as they prepared to leave. "My family can be intense. Are you prepared for that level of scrutiny?" Sophia's laugh was genuine and surprisingly musical. "Marcus, I once convinced a tech mogul's mother that I was a debutante from Charleston despite having never set foot in South Carolina. I think I can handle your grandfather." As they walked out of the restaurant together, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in months: optimism. For the first time since Theodore's ultimatum, he had a plan that might actually work. What Marcus didn't know was that Sophia Martinez had a twin sister. And what he definitely didn't know was that sometimes the best-laid plans have a way of becoming beautifully, catastrophically complicated. The first test came sooner than expected. Marcus received a call from his mother, Caroline Blackwell, 3 days after his meeting with Sophia. Her voice carried that particular tone of aristocratic curiosity that usually preceded an interrogation. "Darling, your grandfather mentioned you've been seeing someone special. Why don't you bring her to dinner this Friday? Nothing formal, just family." Marcus knew just family in the Blackwell household meant his parents, his grandfather, his Aunt Patricia who collected gossip like vintage wines, and probably his cousin Bradley with his senator's daughter-wife Vanessa. The kind of intimate gathering where secrets went to die. He called Sophia immediately. "We're being summoned to the family dinner, Friday night." "Perfect," she replied without hesitation. "That gives us 4 days to prepare. We need to be seen together publicly first. Establish some photographic evidence of our relationship. Are you free tomorrow evening?" The next night, Marcus found himself at the opening of a contemporary art gallery in Soho, playing the role of devoted boyfriend to a woman he'd known for less than a week. Sophia had transformed herself into exactly the kind of woman who would catch Marcus Blackwell's attention, elegant without being flashy, intelligent without being intimidating, and beautiful in a way that photographed well but didn't overshadow his presence. She wore a midnight blue dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, and she moved through the gallery crowd like she'd been born to this world. When she took his arm, the gesture felt natural. When she laughed at his observations about the artwork, the sound was genuine enough to fool him. "The key," she murmured as they posed for a society photographer, "is to make everyone believe we're trying not to be noticed while secretly hoping we are." Marcus watched her work the room and realized he was witnessing a master class in social manipulation. She remembered names, asked follow-up questions about people's children and vacation homes, and somehow made everyone feel like they were the most interesting person she'd met all evening. "How do you do that?" Marcus asked as they shared a taxi back to his penthouse apartment. Do what? Make everyone like you instantly. Sophia's smile was different now, less performative. People want to be seen, Marcus. They want someone to notice the things they're proud of, to ask about the things they care about. It's not manipulation, it's just paying attention. The family dinner at the Blackwell estate was a Victorian mansion on the Upper East Side that had been in the family for 4 generations. Marcus had grown up running through its endless corridors, but returning now with Sophia felt like entering enemy territory. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Theodore Blackwell was waiting in the drawing room, a crystal tumbler of aged scotch in his weathered hands. At 87, he still possessed the kind of presence that could silence a boardroom with a single glance. His pale blue eyes fixed on Sophia the moment they entered. "So, you're the young lady who's captured my grandson's attention." Sophia stepped forward with exactly the right amount of confidence. "Mr. Blackwell, it's an honor to meet you. Marcus speaks of you constantly." "Does he now?" Theodore's smile was sharp as a knife edge. "And what exactly does he say?" "That you built an empire from nothing, that you never ask anyone to do something you wouldn't do yourself, and that you still remember the name of every employee who's worked for the family for more than 5 years. Marcus blinked in surprise. He'd never told Sophia any of those things, but they were absolutely true. Somehow, she'd researched not just the public facts about his grandfather, but the personal details that revealed his character. Theodore's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "You've done your homework." "I always do," Sophia replied smoothly. "Especially when it comes to the people who matter to Marcus." The evening proceeded like a carefully choreographed dance. Sophia charmed Marcus's mother by asking about her charity work with underprivileged children. She impressed his father by demonstrating a surprising knowledge of international markets. She even managed to find common ground with Aunt Patricia by discussing a mutual appreciation for Tuscan architecture. But it was her interaction with Theodore that truly showcased her skills. When he began interrogating her about her background, she deflected with stories about her fictional childhood that were detailed enough to be believable, but boring enough to discourage follow-up questions. "I grew up in La Jolla," she explained over the main course. "My father is a cardiologist, my mother teaches high school French. Very ordinary, really. I think that's why I was drawn to theater. All that drama I never had at home." "And how exactly did you meet my grandson?" Sophia glanced at Marcus with perfectly calibrated affection. "At the Metropolitan Museum Gala for Modern Art." He was standing in front of a Rothko, looking like he was trying to solve a mathematical equation. "I told him he was thinking too hard. She walked up to me and said, 'It's not supposed to make sense, it's supposed to make you feel something,'" Marcus added, playing his part. "I'd been staring at that painting for 20 minutes. "And what did you feel?" Theodore asked, his tone suggesting this was more than casual curiosity. Marcus looked at Sophia, and for a moment the performance felt dangerously real. Like maybe I'd been looking at everything wrong my entire life. The answer seemed to satisfy Theodore, or at least intrigue him enough to move on to other topics. As the evening wound down, Marcus began to believe they might actually pull this off. Then Sophia's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and her face went pale. For just a moment, the mask slipped, and Marcus saw something that looked suspiciously like a panic flash across her features. "Excuse me," she said, standing abruptly. "I need to take this." She stepped out onto the terrace, and through the French doors, Marcus could see her having what appeared to be an intense conversation. Her body language was completely different, tense, urgent, nothing like the composed woman who'd been charming his family moments before. When she returned, she'd recovered her composure, but Marcus noticed her hands were slightly unsteady as she reached for her wine glass. "Everything all right?" he asked quietly. "Fine," she replied, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Just a scheduling conflict I need to resolve." The rest of the dinner passed without incident, but Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something had fundamentally changed. As they said their goodbyes, Theodore pulled Marcus aside. "She's impressive," his grandfather said. "Smart, beautiful, well-mannered. But there's something she's not telling you." "What do you mean?" Theodore's pale eyes studied Marcus with the intensity of a man who'd spent 70 years reading people for a living. "I've been making deals since before you were born, Marcus. I know when someone's hiding something important. The question is whether you're prepared to find out what it is." As they drove back to Manhattan, Marcus watched Sophia stare out the taxi window at the city lights. She'd retreated into herself, the vivacious woman from dinner replaced by someone quieter, more guarded. "That went well," he said, testing the waters. "Yes," she agreed, but her voice was distant. "Your family is lovely." "Sophia, about that phone call." "It was nothing," she cut him off. "Just work." But Marcus had built a billion-dollar company by trusting his instincts, and every instinct he possessed was telling him that Sophia Martinez was about to become a much more complicated problem than he'd bargained for. What he didn't know was that the phone call had been from her twin sister Isabella. And what he definitely didn't know was that Isabella Martinez was about to turn his carefully orchestrated plan into something resembling chaos. Marcus discovered the first real crack in their perfect facade on a Tuesday morning when Sophia arrived 40 minutes late to their scheduled breakfast meeting at the Plaza Hotel. They were supposed to finalize details for his cousin Bradley's birthday party that weekend, another family event where their relationship would be scrutinized and photographed. The woman who slid into the booth across from him looked like Sophia, but something was fundamentally different. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail instead of her usual sophisticated updo. She wore jeans and a Columbia University sweatshirt instead of the carefully curated outfits that had become her trademark. Most tellingly, she seemed nervous in a way that Sophia Martinez never did. "Sorry I'm late," she said, avoiding his eyes as she fumbled with the menu. Traffic was insane. Marcus studied her face, that uncomfortable feeling in his gut growing stronger. "Are you feeling all right? You seem different." She looked up sharply, and for a split second, Marcus saw something like panic flash across her features before she forced a smile. "Just tired. I didn't sleep well last night." But it wasn't just tiredness. Her voice was slightly different, softer, less polished. She ordered coffee black instead of her usual oat milk latte with vanilla syrup. When the waiter brought complimentary pastries, she reached for a chocolate croissant with her left hand, then quickly switched to her right when she noticed Marcus watching. "Sophia," Marcus said carefully, "is there something you need to tell me?" The question hung in the air between them like a loaded gun. She stared at her coffee cup, her fingers drumming against the porcelain in a nervous rhythm that was nothing like Sophia's usual composed stillness. She started, then stopped. When she looked up at him again, her eyes held a vulnerability that seemed entirely foreign to the confident woman he'd been working with. "This is harder than I thought it would be." "What's harder?" "Pretending to be someone I'm not." The irony of her statement wasn't lost on Marcus, considering their entire relationship was built on pretense, but something in her tone suggested she meant something deeper than their business arrangement. Before he could probe further, her phone rang. She glanced at the screen and her face went white. "I have to take this." She stepped outside onto Fifth Avenue, and through the restaurant's floor-to-ceiling windows, Marcus watched her have what appeared to be an argument with whoever was on the other end of the call. Her body language was animated, frustrated, completely unlike the controlled grace that usually defined Sophia's every movement. When she returned, she was visibly shaken. "I'm sorry, Marcus, but I have to go. Something urgent came up." "What kind of urgent?" "Family emergency," she said, already gathering her purse. "I'll call you later about Bradley's party." She was halfway to the door before Marcus could respond, leaving him alone with 2 untouched plates of Eggs Benedict and a growing certainty that something was very wrong. That afternoon, Marcus did something he'd never done before in their arrangement. He showed up unannounced at Sophia's apartment building on the Upper West Side. The doorman, whom Marcus had met during one of their carefully staged casual encounters, seemed surprised to see him. "Miss Martinez isn't in," the doorman said, "but her sister stopped by earlier. Looked just like her. I almost didn't notice it wasn't her until she seemed confused about which elevator bank to take." Marcus felt his world tilt slightly off its axis. "Her sister?" "Yeah, twin sister, I think. Never seen her before, but the resemblance was uncanny." She seemed lost. Kept looking around like she'd never been here before. The pieces of a puzzle Marcus hadn't even realized he was working on suddenly began falling into place. The phone call at his grandfather's dinner. Sophia's strange behavior that morning. The nervous energy that seemed so foreign to the woman he'd hired. His phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. "Can't make it to Bradley's party tonight. Food poisoning. You'll have to go alone. Sorry." But Bradley's party wasn't tonight. It was Saturday, 3 days away. Sophia Martinez, who kept detailed notes about every aspect of their arrangement, who had memorized his family tree and their social calendar with military precision, had gotten the date wrong. Marcus made a decision that would have seemed impossible a week earlier. Instead of calling Sophia, he called the doorman back and asked for the building's security footage from that morning. What he saw on the grainy surveillance video confirmed his suspicions and raised a dozen new questions. Two women had entered the building within 30 minutes of each other. Both had long dark hair, both were approximately the same height and build, but their body language was completely different. The first woman moved with Sophia's characteristic confidence, her posture erect, her stride purposeful. She'd stayed in the building for exactly 12 minutes before leaving through the service entrance, something Sophia had never done in the months he'd been tracking her routine for security purposes. The second woman had arrived nervous and hesitant, looking around like she was seeing the building for the first time. She'd taken the elevator to Sophia's floor and hadn't been seen leaving. Marcus sat in his car outside the building for 2 hours, his mind racing through possibilities. Twins weren't uncommon, but Sophia had never mentioned having a sister, let alone a twin. Her background check had listed her as an only child. Either his security team had missed something crucial, or Sofia Martinez had been lying to him from the beginning. At 7:30 p.m., a woman emerged from the building who looked exactly like Sophia but moved like a completely different person. She walked with her shoulders slightly hunched, constantly glancing around as if expecting to be followed. When she hailed a taxi, she did it with her left hand raised high, a small detail that might have escaped notice if Marcus hadn't been watching so carefully. Marcus followed the taxi through Manhattan traffic, staying far enough back to avoid detection but close enough to see where she was going. The cab pulled up in front of a small Italian restaurant in Little Italy, the kind of neighborhood place that tourists rarely found. Through the restaurant's window, Marcus watched the woman who looked like Sophia embrace an older couple who could only be her parents. The reunion was emotional, tearful, nothing like the controlled interactions he'd observed from Sofia Martinez. As he sat in his rental car across the street, Marcus realized he was looking at what might be the real Sofia Martinez, which raised the terrifying question, who exactly had he hired to be his fake fiancée? His phone rang, startling him from his surveillance. The caller ID showed Sophia's number. Marcus? The voice was different again, more polished, more controlled, back to the version he recognized. I'm feeling much better. That food poisoning was terrible, but I think I can make it to Bradley's party after all. Saturday at 8, right? Right, Marcus said, his mouth dry. Saturday at 8. Perfect. I'll pick up that navy dress we talked about, the one that photographs well. They'd never discussed a navy dress. In fact, they'd agreed she would wear the emerald green gown that complemented her skin tone and would stand out in family photos. Sophia, Marcus said carefully, what's my middle name? There was a pause that lasted 3 heartbeats too long. James, she said finally, Marcus James Blackwell. His middle name was Alexander. Sofia Martinez, who had memorized every detail of his life down to his childhood pet's name and his college roommate's birthday, had gotten his middle name wrong. Marcus ended the call and sat in the growing darkness outside the Italian restaurant, watching a woman who looked exactly like his fake fiancée laugh with her parents over bowls of pasta. He was beginning to understand that his carefully orchestrated plan had become something else entirely. The question was whether he was prepared to discover what that something else might be. Marcus arrived at Bradley's birthday party with a plan that would have impressed his business competitors. He'd spent the previous day having his security team dig deeper into the Martinez family, and what they'd uncovered had rewritten everything he thought he knew about his arrangement. Sofia Martinez did have a twin sister, Isabella Martinez, but the public records told a story that Elite Companion Services had carefully omitted. Sophia was indeed the accomplished actress with a Juilliard degree, but Isabella was a pediatric nurse at Mount Sinai Hospital who had never set foot on a stage in her life. More intriguingly, Isabella had been dealing with a family crisis that aligned perfectly with the timeline of those mysterious phone calls. Their father had suffered a heart attack 3 weeks ago, right around the time Sophia's behavior had started becoming erratic. The Blackwell family's Hamptons estate was buzzing with the usual collection of old money socialites, business moguls, and political figures who comprised their social circle. Marcus positioned himself near the main entrance, waiting to see which version of Sophia would walk through the door. At exactly 8:15 p.m., she appeared in the emerald green gown they'd originally discussed, not the navy dress that the imposter had mentioned on the phone. Her hair was styled in an elegant chignon, her makeup flawless, her posture radiating the confident grace he'd come to associate with the real Sofia Martinez. But Marcus had learned to look for subtleties. When she kissed his cheek in greeting, she lingered just a moment longer than their professional arrangement required. When she took his arm, her grip was slightly tighter than usual. And when she smiled at him, there was something in her eyes that hadn't been there before, something that looked suspiciously like guilt. "You look beautiful," Marcus said, meaning it more than he should have. "Thank you," she replied, but her voice carried an undertone of nervousness that the accomplished actress had never displayed before. They moved through the party like the practiced couple they'd become, but Marcus found himself studying her every gesture, cataloging every micro-expression. She was definitely the Sofia who had charmed his grandfather, who had researched his family with meticulous precision, who had crafted their fictional love story with professional expertise. But she was also distracted in a way that seemed entirely foreign to her character. "Sofia," Marcus said as they stepped onto the terrace overlooking the ocean, "we need to talk." She stiffened almost imperceptibly. "About what?" "About your sister." The words hung in the salt air between them like an accusation. Sofia's carefully constructed composure cracked, and for the first time since he'd known her, she looked genuinely afraid. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Isabella Martinez, pediatric nurse at Mount Sinai, your twin sister who's been covering for you while you dealt with your father's heart attack." Sofia closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, the professional mask had finally slipped completely. "How long have you known?" "I figured it out yesterday. The question is, how long has this been going on?" She leaned against the terrace railing, suddenly looking exhausted. 3 weeks. "The night of your grandfather's dinner, I got the call that Dad was in the ICU. I couldn't leave him, but I couldn't afford to break our contract either. Isabella." She shook her head. Isabella volunteered to step in temporarily. A pediatric nurse pretended to be a professional actress? "You don't understand," Sofia said, turning to face him. "Isabella has been covering for me our entire lives. When I had auditions, when I was traveling for work, when I needed to be in 2 places at once, we've been switching places since we were kids. She's the only person who knows me well enough to pull it off." Marcus thought about the woman he'd encountered at breakfast. Nervous, vulnerable, more genuine than Sofia had ever allowed herself to be. "She's not like you." "No," Sofia agreed quietly. "She's better than me. She's real. And you've been lying to me from the beginning." "I've been doing my job," Sofia said, but the fire had gone out of her voice. "You hired me to play a role, Marcus. That's what I've been doing." "Even when your sister was the one playing it?" The question seemed to break something inside her. "Especially then. Do you have any idea how terrifying it was watching Isabella try to be me? She doesn't know how to lie the way I do. She doesn't know how to be charming and distant and perfectly controlled. She's just herself." Marcus remembered the vulnerability he'd seen in Isabella's eyes, the way she'd seemed genuinely nervous about disappointing him. "She was terrified she'd mess up your contract." "She was terrified she'd hurt you," Sofia corrected. "What is the difference between us?" Before Marcus could respond, the terrace doors opened, and Theodore Blackwell stepped outside, his sharp eyes immediately taking in the tension between them. "Am I interrupting something?" his grandfather asked, but his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Actually," Marcus said, making a decision that surprised even him, "there's something I need to tell you, grandfather, about Sofia and me." Sofia's eyes widened in panic, but Marcus continued, "Our relationship, it's not what you think it is." Theodore's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his pale blue eyes. "Isn't it? We're not really engaged. I hired Sofia to pose as my fiancée because of your ultimatum about the trust fund." The confession hung in the air for several long moments. Then, to Marcus's complete shock, Theodore began to laugh, a genuine, hearty sound that Marcus hadn't heard since he was a child. "You hired a fake fiancée," Theodore repeated, wiping his eyes. "My brilliant grandson hired an actress to fool me into believing he was in love. You're not angry?" "Angry. Marcus, I've been waiting for you to figure out what was important to you for 30 years. The fact that you went to such elaborate lengths to protect your independence tells me more about your character than any suitable marriage ever could." Marcus stared at his grandfather in confusion. "I don't understand." "The trust fund was never conditional on marriage," Theodore said gently. "It was conditional on you proving you could make decisions based on what you believed in, rather than what you thought I wanted to hear. You passed that test the moment you decided to hire Miss Martinez instead of marrying someone you didn't love." Sophia had been listening to this exchange with growing amazement. "You knew?" "I suspected from the beginning," Theodore admitted. "You were too perfect, too polished, too exactly what Marcus would think I wanted. But what I didn't expect was how real your feelings for each other would become." Marcus looked at Sophia, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time. "Grandfather." "The trust fund is yours, Marcus, it always was. But if you'll take an old man's advice, don't let Miss Martinez walk away just because your original reasons for being together weren't entirely honest." Theodore headed back toward the party, pausing at the door. "Oh, and Marcus, I'd very much like to meet Isabella. If what I observed at breakfast yesterday was any indication, she's quite remarkable." Marcus felt his jaw drop. "You knew about Isabella too?" "I know about everything that affects my family," Theodore said with a smile, "including the fact that you've fallen in love with both of them, the actress and the nurse. The question is, which one are you brave enough to choose?" As his grandfather disappeared back into the party, Marcus turned to find Sophia watching him with an expression he'd never seen before, hope mixed with terror, vulnerability wrapped in uncertainty. "He's right, you know," she said quietly. "Isabella is remarkable. She's everything I pretend to be, but better, because it's real." "And what about you?" Marcus asked, stepping closer. "Who are you, when you're not pretending to be someone else?" Sophia's smile was soft and genuine in a way that had nothing to do with performance. "I'm someone who spent so long playing roles that I forgot how to be myself. But being with you, watching Isabella be herself with you, it made me remember what that felt like." Marcus reached for her hand, noting that she didn't pull away. "So what happens now?" "Now," Sophia said, "you have a choice to make. You could walk away from all of this. From me, from Isabella, from the complications we've brought into your life. Or you could stay and help me figure out who I really am. It might take a while, and it definitely won't be as simple as our original arrangement." Marcus looked out at the ocean, thinking about the woman who'd charmed his family with professional precision, and the woman who'd been terrified of disappointing him. Two sides of the same story, both of them real in their own way. "I built a $2 billion company," he said finally. "I think I can handle complicated things." 6 months later, Marcus Blackwell married Isabella Martinez in a small ceremony in San Diego, surrounded by both their families. Sophia served as her sister's maid of honor and had never been happier to play a supporting role. The Blackwell Trust Fund remained exactly where it had always been, waiting for Marcus to claim it when he was ready. But by then, he discovered that the most valuable things in life couldn't be inherited or bought or arranged through contracts. They could only be found when you stopped pretending to be someone else and started being brave enough to be yourself. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.